Ben, thank you very much for coming on the podcast again. So obviously today what we will be discussing is all about the importance of cybersecurity when it comes to real life physical events. But for many of the audience you might recognise Ben, but just for those who don't, you might just give a quick update to the audience if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Ben Morris, current role is Group Head of Cybersecurity at World Rugby. Came on a couple of years ago to talk about AI, and that's blown up quite significantly. And hopefully today I can kind of maybe demystify some of maybe some assumptions around cybersecurity and hosting major events. We got a major World Cup coming up this year, around August, September, and all the planning and preparation about that. So I will just dig into all the subjects and hopefully give a little bit more insight into the world of running physical events and cybersecurity that's involved with that.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, it might be a bit of a vague question this. So like you say, the Rugby World Cup is happening this year. Where do you start with it? Where do you even start with planning an event like that?
Yeah, so a lot of the planning has to happen like a couple of years, even well before the event.
Yep.
So once the host nation's been declared as like, it's going to be in the UK, the first challenge is around venues. Cybersecurity isn't really consulted in regards to the venues that they select. That is an organisational decision, usually at the highest levels of an organisation. So for World Rugby, it's our council, similar to like FIFA and the Olympics. That's decided well ahead in advance. Yep. So I would get like a leaflet effectively going, these are the venues that have been selected to host the games, these are the events that are going to go on. Obviously the schedule will change based on the teams that qualify, all that kind of stuff. But these are the venues. Yep. Once you understand that, then you need to create like a framework of delivery. That takes a period of time because you've got, so for World Rugby, we have 53 departments that are involved in all the planning, all the way from accreditation to food and beverage to transportation to hospitality, 53, I'm not going to name all of them. It's a lot. And what my responsibility is to build a framework that encompasses cybersecurity across all of those. So when we're consulting with food and beverage, how do we make sure that is delivered securely to venues and the access control is delivered? Some, like we call them functional areas. Some functional areas are more involved, especially if it's in technology. Yep. So like broadcasters is a big technology element to any sport. If you speak to any sport, broadcast is probably their number one, because if you can't broadcast a game, it doesn't really happen. Yep. Effectively. Yep. Like imagine if the World Cup happened and you couldn't watch it. It's like, okay, what happened? Like, it's just wild. So first you build that framework, and that's from all the way from the planning, preparation to mobilization, operational, decommissioning. So that framework gets delivered. It takes about 6 months to pull that together. And the good thing about like major sports is that can then be repeated. So that blueprint can then get replicated for a future event. Yep. Most major sports have only just went through that transitional period. So World Rugby, FIFA, I think Olympics, and pretty much all the major sports, over the last 4 years, they just basically gave the responsibility to host nation. You do all of it. Yep. And we just basically govern the rules of the game. Yep. That's now shifted because of sustainability and reuse. It's not viable for host nations to build all the infrastructure, to do all the operations. It's just too expensive. So now all the major international federations saying we'll do it ourselves. So with that, everybody's building these new frameworks. And I was not, going into World Rugby, this is my first major sporting kind of role. I had to build it all from scratch. There was no blueprint for me to just take off the shelf and then, refresh it. I had to build all the framework from scratch. So once that framework has been established, now it can be reused all over. That's really brilliant news for everybody because it's reused with sustainability. Yep. So that's the boring planning stage. And then it's actually, I'd call the delivery side of it. And then you're speaking to the venues. So most venues, they call them multi-purpose. Okay. So one of the venues that we're hosting one of the games at is like York. Yep. York isn't just used for rugby. It runs like football events, other sporting things, maybe potentially live music, whatever it may be. So these are multi-purpose venues. So they have dedicated technology teams. They don't have anybody in cyber because they wear multiple hats. So you need to work with these technology teams going, this is our standard, this is our framework to deliver cybersecurity at a major event. How far away are you here? Yep. Do you have firewalls? Do you have good network segmentation? Do you restrict guests on your Wi-Fi? I'm just focused on network there. And it's like, how do you do access control? What are your turnstiles? Is it digital? Is it physical? What's your internet connectivity like? You ask all these probing questions I think there's a list of like 112 questions we ask all the venues, going where are we up to.
Yeah. And did you create that?
I use like a NIST and CMMI to benchmark the maturity of each venue. So you do that initial assessment, that takes a period of time, just working with all the venues, and then you've got like a blueprint going, the venues at this level. Is that good? Is that bad? And then we, based on our own maturity, we go, that needs to change and it needs to be uplifted to X. That might be implementing an outsourced SOC, as an example, or putting more detect and respond capabilities at a venue. And you're doing that for eight individual venues with their own responsibilities, their own staff. Gets a bit mental. Alongside that, with the planning preparation, you're consulting with all the functional areas around what technology they bring in. So building new ticketing sites on Ticketmaster, building new technology when it comes to fan engagement. I'm all over that in regards to evaluating how does that interconnect with data, how do people have access to it, are fans safe, all that kind of, I guess, the technology approach. And then the last element is engaging with physical security, which I know we want to dig into. So physical security is now like an interconnected part of cybersecurity. You can't just do it in isolation because all the turnstiles, all the CCTV, it's all on a network somewhere. So that has to be secured by cyber. And if it doesn't, a cyber attack could take down the turnstiles and nobody can either enter the venue or exit. That's a massive health and safety risk, and that's a major incident. So I need to work very closely with physical security. Then at that point, you're probably bringing in the police. So because the venues are split all around across the UK, you're dealing with 8 different police forces. So they assign a commander in the police that coordinates all these police forces. So then you've got DCMS, which is the Department of Digital, Culture and Sport, I think it is. And then you've got Home Office. So all these government departments then get involved in regards to making sure the preparations for physical and cyber security is considered. And then the NCSC also support command incident response side. So, you know, my role there, part of this delivery thing is one, delivering good security at venue. At the venues, stadiums, hotels where the team's going to stay, training facilities. Then you've got the technology side, new technology to bring these events together, which is always very complicated. And then you've got the third element, which is coordinating with UK government to coordinate all the physical activity alongside the police forces, fan zones and stuff like that. And every single one has to have cybersecurity in it. So quite a well-varied role when it comes to delivery. And then once the delivery section, then it goes into more assurance. You're testing these things. Does this thing work? Are we prepared when it comes to readiness, tabletop exercises, crisis planning? We use a governmental framework called C3. It's quite commonly used across all sports, and that is a way to prepare for a major event. So that is coordinating with these 50 odd plus functional areas. And all of the suppliers, critical suppliers we work with, the government departments, the police, we're all on calls saying, if this happened, what would happen? So if the power went out at York, what would we do? Okay. What if we had a major cyber attack at maybe one of our most critical systems technology-wise? What would we do? And then we'd go through hundreds of scenarios. And then, you know, we'd get comfortable in regards to the level of risk. We'd tabletop it, and then once that readiness is done, that takes a period of time. That's what we're in right now, readiness. Then we know game time. There's nothing else we can do. We've built the systems, we've built the readiness, we've done the assurance, we're off to the races, and then it's all over again. So you tear it all down, you do kind of a lessons learned, a kind of, I guess, a root cause if anything went wrong. Those lessons learned and get built into that framework that I started at the start, and then in the future tournament, we replicate that kind of delivery model in a new country. So in 2027, it's Australia. In 2031, it's US, and it will follow that same approach.
Wow, so a hell of a lot there then, a hell of a lot. So obviously a few questions off the fact of that. It kind of sounds like, obviously, when you're in a traditional end user, not something that's like more focused on events, more like one-off events. It sounds like, obviously, you know, you have to look after sort of the supply chain. To this, it's kind of like you're looking after hundreds of little supply chains because it's little different things. There's so many different attack vectors where an incident could happen, and it sounds like there's so much sort of stakeholder management that you have to be aware of. I suppose my question is, how do you know, like, obviously when the date happens and the World Cup happens, that it's all going to be fine, or do you not? It's just like you say, you can do all this readiness and it's just what happens on the day.
Well, what we do is about a year before the major event is we conduct a strategic risk assessment. That that is focused on the eventuality of a cyber attack.
Yep.
So part of that is we're evaluating what are the viable threat actors that are going to be targeting a Rugby World Cup.
Yep.
Working with the UK government in regards to if there's some geopolitical tension going on, is that going to be a way to embarrass the UK government? So we're looking at that. Then we're thinking about organised crime. Major sporting events are so lucrative for cyber crime criminals, because they're not just targeting us for potentially extra, availability issues. If they can take down a broadcaster and they can say, we'll bring up your broadcaster if you transfer us like 20k, that is a major kind of selling point for the cyber criminal to go after. And then they'll go after fans, so they'll go after tickets and try and go resell, create spoofed merchandise websites. So cyber criminals are super active. Nation state could be super active. Then you've got hacktivists. If you want to amplify a message to the world, what's the best way to do that? You go into a major event and, we're working with the BBC. You hack into BBC and publish, I don't know, some hacktivist campaign. That's brilliant, because you've got millions of eyeballs. Instead of doing a protest, that's what you do. So hacktivists are super active. And then you've got, like, I call them the script kiddies of the world. They're like, I'm going to take a pop at that because that's going to make me super, super famous on these forums talking about hacking. So every single threat actor group is going to be super active. So then part of this risk assessment is, what are they going to most likely go after? And that's how I focus my energy, is like, okay, what is the probability of major disruption at a major event? So you list all your critical systems that you're using. How are they going to be leveraged for tournament time? What kind of protective measures do we have in place? What is the likelihood of a hacktivist getting into XY system to cause X, Y, and Z disruption, whatever it may be? And then you have to run that through, and then based on that risk assessment, you can probably have a top 5 of, like, these will really hurt us if this happens. And that's all I have to do, because you're right, there's so many moving parts in that puzzle. Like, that's why I tried to go into a little bit more detail with you then, because it's like, you have to be ruthless with prioritization. The way to do that is a fully fledged risk assessment with a threat assessment from other third parties and critical suppliers, going, right, we need to focus on these 5 things, because if we nail these 5 things down, yes, there could be some minor disruption. They might, I don't know, take down the fantasy rugby table, whatever it may be. It will annoy people. It's like, oh my God, I wish that was there. But at least you can still go to a game, you can still watch it, you can still buy food and beverage, you can still go onto a train and get to the venue. Okay, so what we need to do is, yes, that's important, but we need to make sure the cyber protections in place for these things are super, super valuable. And that's how I prioritize it, that ruthless prioritization. And if you get through the 5 things and you've got really good security measures in place and you test it and you validate it, and it's like, we're as prepared as we can be, brilliant. And you can keep going for that list. But most likely, and probably this is for every single sport, you just can't do everything. And it's not viable to do everything, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with thousands of suppliers, thousands of touch points. I'm not just dealing with internal stakeholders, I'm dealing with fans, I'm dealing with external kind of eyeballs from all across the globe. You have to kind of be really ruthless in regards to how you focus things. And that's the best way for any cyber practitioner, is understand your threats, understand your vulnerabilities, then have a real good evaluation in regards to what is the likelihood of that materializing. That should then create a risk. What preparations, what mitigation can put in place, and then hopefully from there that will help you kind of ruthlessly prioritize what you need to deliver. Nice.
So I'm just thinking in terms of, obviously, with your role being quite unique in the sense of, like, it is this build up to this one event. Firstly, is there an advantage of hackers hitting pre or post event? And does it happen, or is it a case of, like, look, in my world, it's all or nothing with this, like, 2-3 week event? Because surely, like, the data that you're gathering will all be there, or pretty much be there in the weeks leading up to it, and especially the weeks after as well, where you might be like, okay, cool, we're in the green, we've done a successful event, but there's still so much that could go wrong post event as well. So, what's your thoughts on all that?
So. For major event organisers, we go through these periods, like we call it downtime periods, where you're planning, like the framework. You're not delivering a major event. So this year is an operational heavy year. So all our focus is operational delivery, readiness, tabletops, all that kind of stuff. So the focus really shifts. In a low year, so when it might not involve a World Cup, the threat changes. So in a non-delivery focused major tournament year, it's the usual threats that go after organisations. So sport isn't alien to that. So we see a massive increase in potentially business email compromise, invoice fraud, trying to compromise assets, malware delivery. That's the kind of stuff. They're not really going after particular assets like data.
Yes.
Although I think if they got hold of that, obviously that would be severely catastrophic to the organisation. That's why we put a lot of focus on data protection and the measures around that. But they're just really trying their pot luck. They don't really know what they're going after, really. They're just going to use those mass volume kind of attacks. But when you go into a tournament delivery, it become much more focused.
Okay.
So then they're targeting, impersonation, particularly on executives. You see more AI impersonation, deepfakes of athletes. You see the threat profile and the kind of techniques used change in a tournament delivery year. And we saw that with the Olympics last year. So on the non-tournament year when the Olympics were being planned, followed this exact same trajectory, and then during the Olympics year, then the threat changed completely. They are more focused on, they know what they want to go after, and that's what we are witnessing is in the non-tournament years, it's just fire and forget, and hopefully just catch somebody. They're not really targeted. The usual cyber criminals kind of just going after everything. Maybe buying some data off the dark web or doing some kind of reconnaissance on staff and then just blasting stuff out there. That's fine. Every single CISO is probably used to that. But in a tournament delivery year, it's okay, they'll do a full profile of your organisation. They'll try and understand what technology you use, your suppliers, and it'll be much more sophisticated and targeted. So in less volume, more sophistication is probably what I'd say. And you see that. So then after the tournament, it will follow that same cycle. So 2026, you'll see that sophistication drop off because the value is less, because it's hacktivists, script kiddies, their motivation has decreased because it's less eyes on, so I'm not going to be able to amplify a message, so I don't really care now. Cyber criminals are there's not going to be any fans buying food and beverage or tickets, so my motivation is gone because I'll not be able to extort that, or I can't disrupt the event for availability, so I'm not interested now. And then the nation states are well, the tournament's changed from the UK to Australia. We really wanted to embarrass the UK, so we're not interested. So all those threat actor groups, kind of their motivation decreases, and it just runs in that kind of cycle of 2026. It's just that high volume, not much sophistication. But then I guess 2027, it'll ramp up and do the same. The sophistication and the motivation of those threat actor groups will then increase, and then obviously be more targeted. And that's the value and the importance of people in my role is have really well established threat intelligence networks working with the governments, and that's why they're involved in these working groups, because I'm only one person trying to coordinate all these things, so I have to get expert guidance and using these tools to my advantage to understand what is those pivot points, what techniques, and it changes all the time. This year obviously it's all about AI. So how is AI going to be leveraged against us to disrupt a major event?
Of course.
I don't have the answers because it's a new technology. So, we're working very closely with all these kind of specialist agencies to go, what should we expect? Are we going to see lots of 0 days being developed? Most likely not against us, because why would they? But they could do. So it's these are the evolving threats. So it's really, really important. Another part of my role is being really, really on top of threat intelligence and what's going on in the market, I guess in the overall market of cybercrime.
Nice. Really, I don't know where you find the time to be honest with you, Ben. I don't know where you find the time. So I want to just throw a couple of hypothetical situations at you. So obviously at Tokyo 2020 at the Olympics, there was an attack on ticketing systems, broadcasting services and credential databases. This event actually leveraged firms and government agencies for defence. What would how would you respond to that, and how would you have prepared for that? And I'm sure that you might even have some awareness of what actually happened.
So that's an interesting one, because from my knowledge, your ticketing, your broadcast systems, all the systems that you just listed there shouldn't have connectivity to each other. So that's the first thing is why are they all on the same network? What was the kind of inflection point when it comes to how did disruption to ticketing and then also take down broadcast? That would be my first question. So that sounds like already a sophisticated attack, because clearly there was some reconnaissance, and they're my assumption would be those systems weren't connected. So that would involve a very sophisticated attack in regards to, we know ticketing is going to be hosted by this provider, we know broadcast is going to be provided by this provider, and all the other systems, and it seemed to have just all happened at once. So I think that I understand the challenge that they fought, because if it was me, I would see, it depends on the sequence of events, ticketing's being attacked right now, so we focus all our energy on there. And it's broadcast is down. I think the team was overwhelmed in regards to how sophisticated the attack was. So how would I prepare for that? And I think ultimately in this situation, it has to be government at that level.
Right.
Like, yes, we will have various preparations, good detection and response capabilities, but if there is a widely distributed attack on multiple systems, multiple providers at the same time, the whole kind of security operations team would just be overwhelmed. Because we might be able to focus on 2 systems, but there could be 5, 6, 7 systems. At that point, you prioritise the criticality of each incident. So it's like, right, okay, we've got ticketing down. Depends on when the event. So if the event was literally going to go on an hour before that attack, we've got a really big problem because people are travelling to the venue. Do we need to put out some kind of bulletin to fans that are going there going, we got a disruption, don't go to venue, because then you have the situation that in the Euros where you, like at Wembley, all the fans subside on the venue and you just overwhelm physical security and the police. So you need to avoid that kind of, I guess, the hoarding of fans in a certain location. So, okay, let's prioritise that first, because if we can't get people in venue, we're going to have a real big problem. Prioritise. So that jumps up the list already, priority 1. Then it's like you mentioned broadcast. Okay, if it's an hour out and the broadcasters are like, we need to put something on the screen, guys, because we're going to be recording the game show, whatever it was, the sports. Okay, so how do we make sure that we can broadcast? Because then there's also commercial deals. Because I don't know if they have a major commercial deal with a food and beverage provider. They're like, we want to be prime time, the first event.
Of course.
And it's like, we can't get the broadcast up. We can't record it. There's going to be penalties when it comes to contracts. All that kind of, it gets ugly. So it's like, okay, broadcast seems quite important. And then if there's all these other systems, so you have to prioritise it at that point. So we're like, we can do the first 2, but we can't even deal with these right now. And that's when you have to get external support. Hopefully at that point, the Tokyo one is a really good example. You should have retainer service in place. People like forensic experts to come in. You need to have, and that's where the readiness that we're doing this year is so important. If all this stuff happened all at once, how do we prioritise that? You don't want to do that on the time, because you got people flapping around and panicking. You need a really cool head, and you get that cool head by doing those exercises. So that's my personal opinion. How I would have run that if I was involved in the Tokyo is, look at all the incidents as it's a distributed attack. It can't be coincident that they're all being attacked at the same time. Okay, we're dealing with a sophisticated threat actor. Prioritise each system based on its criticality to the running of the event and the safety of the public. And then from there is, if you can't deal with the level of incidents and the criticality of all of them, bring in your third parties, bring in your forensic specialists and your SOC specialists, bring in the government to help. Because at that level, it's probably going to be nation state. If somebody's doing that level of distributed attack on multiple systems, cyber criminals are very unlikely to have that degree of sophistication, because that costs a lot of money to do. So most likely it's nation state. At that point, you're calling up going, we got a problem. No private entity can deal with a nation state attack. So you need to bring in specialists from them as well. So that's my own opinion. I don't know how they dealt with it, but that's how I would personally deal with it.
Of course. And I just wanted to pick up there, like, it sounded like you kind of fall back on this prioritisation matrix that I'm guessing you kind of build in the preparation for this event. And you listed 2 key variables there, in the sense of the running of the event and public safety. Public safety is very much, it's human life. It very much comes down to, like human life above all else is pivotal. But the running of an event sounds like everyone that you're speaking to, as you mentioned at the start of this podcast, that you've got food and beverage, you've got broadcasting. I'm sure that they all think that their element is number 1 priority. So is it your voice that has the final say, in the sense of like, okay, the running event falls down to broadcasting, this, that, or is there like an overseeing governing body where it's like, okay, this is what's most important, this is second, this is third? How does that fall?
So part of the strategic risk assessment is there's various criteria where we score a risk. And that's just not based on the usual thing when people say risk assessment is likelihood versus impacts. That's just too rudimentary for what we need. It actually needs to be more complex. So we break it down based on impact to public safety, impact to the brand and reputation of the organisation, World Rugby being the one. Then we've got disruption to the event itself, so the availability of the tournament. Then you've got kind of data protection consequences, so if the system went down and then somebody got that data. So there's like several different variables that we evaluate, and then we validate that with the functional area. So let's just pick on food and beverage. Right, there will be a functional area lead part of each area. So when we got this risk and we were like, actually, we think food and beverage, really important when it comes to revenue, but is it really going to stop an event not going ahead? No. Is it going to impact our brand and image if you can't get food and beverage to a venue? probably not. We go through that and be really methodical and kind of try and have a very holistic view of kind of thing going on.
Yep.
Then we sit down with the functional area going, we scored your risk X because it was only 2 parts of this criteria which was major.
Yep.
Do you agree? It's like, fine, okay. Then we might have another risk broadcast and it literally 6 out of the 7 will be like major critical to the tournament.
Yep.
We'd sit down with them and going, we think your risk is really high.
Yep.
Sometimes actually people don't like their risk being high because it means eyeballs on them to do a good job. So there's a kind of to and fro in regards to, do you want to have the visibility that your risk is super critical, or do you want to fly under the radar and nobody cares about it?
Yeah.
So yeah, you do that with every single functional area and all their critical systems.
Yep.
And then from that analysis and validating with other functional areas, you then have a table.
Yep.
Like that table could be 100 deep of all the systems, validated with the functional area leads around the criticality of those assets. Yep. And the risk to the tournament going ahead. Yep. And then that is all signed off by the board or SLT going, yes, we agree. And then we go ahead. So in the event of a live incident, we'll just pull out the playbook going, these are all our critical systems. If we have an incident related to, the top 20 assets on this list, automatically a critical incident. So then our mobilization of assets when it comes to that incident is very, very quick. Priority 1, SOC get all over it. And then using your example, if, garbage collection, that's an example. That an incident comes in where the garbage collection company can't come in and collect. Okay, it's an incident, but we've already got a priority 1 incident going on. We'll deal with that once that's over. So then we can have that ruthless prioritization when incidents coming in, because it will happen. You're not just going to deal with one incident throughout the whole tournament. You'll have multiple incidents going through, and you use that criticality matrix that you've approved at the highest level of the organization going, if it affects broadcast, we know it's a critical, everybody's aware of it, there's no illusion, that's priority 1. So if like the garbage their team come to me going, my thing's number 1. I'm like, no, you signed it off. We all agreed. Broadcast is a higher priority. It's like, get it. I understand. And we're really, really crystal clear and transparent around how we made that analysis. So everybody in those functional areas is shared that matrix about how we got to that conclusion. So nobody's under the illusion going, everybody who is involved in a major tournament wants the major tournament to go ahead. So if we're like, this tournament is going to go ahead because broadcast is down, the garbage collection team are like, we get it. We won't pester you. Just come to us once everything's finished because we've got this issue. Cool. So then that's where that ruthless prioritization comes in. So that's why that strategic risk assessment is so important, because without that, I wouldn't understand all the critical assets. Then I wouldn't understand all the threats and all the vulnerabilities and the risks that are associated to that. So then I wouldn't be able to have that transparent conversation with all the functional areas. Then the executive won't know around what should we be concerned about. Then we can't do the readiness exercise, and then we can't do that ruthless prioritization at tournament time. So you probably already in your head figure out going, that sounds really important, you need to do that. So because everything else is underpinned by that analysis.
Nice. And it sounds like this whole preparation, this preparation matrix that sort of quantifies the risk is absolutely crucial. Now, to throw this into it, which is like in security, obviously you've always got to be kind of prepared for the craziness that goes on. Misinformation, disinformation, whichever way you want to look at it these days, is absolutely getting bigger and bigger with the growth of social media platforms. So my example is sort of Euro 2020 or 2021, whenever it was. I think it shifted the year, didn't it? So it got all confused with COVID. But when it was at Wembley, England, Italy, and there was loads of fan disruption, as you alluded to a few minutes ago. Now, I was obviously keeping up to date with it via Twitter and seeing sort of the riots that were going on outside of it, people sort of breaking into the stadium, fans actually turning on fans, their own fans, and getting into fights. There's kids, there's families. It was, it got pretty ugly, and it could have got uglier. Now, my question to you is, how do you like I'm not saying that was all as a result of misinformation, disinformation on Twitter, and just to kind of put a pin in it, for anyone that doesn't know, I'm sure you can explain better, but essentially you can also get people on these platforms that provoke violence and provoke sort of fake news with the aim of sort of creating riots or tarnishing brands, whatever it might be, on these social media platforms. Now, to jump back in, if an event was to happen at the Rugby World Cup where you're deliberately getting threat actors trying to cause danger to human life, this is something that's happening in real time. How do you even prepare for that when it's not sort of happening and it's happening on the fly, as opposed to sort of like a social media actor? How do you even respond to that?
Yeah, well, misinformation I think is a really big threat, not just for sport, just in general.
Yep.
I think just using the Euros one, it was a multiple areas of that one which was challenging. So yes, you did have misinformation when it comes to people wanting to cause a disruption to the match. You also had people scaremongering in regards to if you're not in at a certain time, you're not be able to get in. So then people are panicking and need to rush to the venue. So you got people got legitimate fans spreading misinformation because they've been told by somebody who's on the ground on a train going, if you don't get in 20 minutes before the game, you're not going to let you in. So people are panicking. So you got people rushing in, and that's caused that stampede effect. Then you got the mix of people want to cause disruption. Then you've got the other mix where they couldn't get a ticket and they wanted to get into it, so they wanted to break in. So you got 4 mixes of different people getting misinformation about the event, which causes an absolute firestorm for the venue to try and coordinate that. Because what you want to do is obviously you don't want to. You absolutely want to avoid any kind of harm to the fans, your staff, but also you don't want to stop the event going ahead. Yes, that's an absolute bloody nightmare as well.
Contrast.
So I think it's funny because when I watched the documentary about it, I thought they handled it really well considering the circumstances. Yeah. I think ultimately that is just a firestorm. There's no other way to put it because you've got all these different misinformation groups coordinated into one particular area, and also the English is super passionate about football. Yes. That's another problem. Yes. Is they love their football. Yes. And it's everybody wants to be there. So unlike maybe some other events where there might not be that passion to be there 2 hours before the game. No, for Wembley in the final, it's everybody
with the host nation being involved in it as well. It's a perfect storm.
Yeah, it is. I dread it if that happened again because it's just the preparation involved in that is just insane. The police were just blindsided by it. Yeah. So I guess going kind of on my perspective, how would I deal with that? You saw it in the documentary on the Wembley one. It is mainly that's when the police get involved because ultimately there's only so much we can do as a private entity in physical security to avoid that. So using the sources that we have, we might see some misinformation online. We would hopefully put out some kind of PR in regards to this is fake information. Only if you want to get real-time updates in regards to the match, go to these websites. So we would publish legitimate sources going, only get your information from here. That's really, really crucial. Stop that misinformation. It's always going to happen, especially when you've got these open source social media platforms where anybody can post anything. You can't police the internet, guys. So it's we would openly, particularly when we're sharing ticket information, we would share, get your up-to-date travel information from this website.
Yes.
Don't listen to anything else. Don't listen to the guy down the shop or whatever. That's the first thing, is try and control that outlet when it comes to misinformation. Secondly is you would do coordination exercises with the police. So it's if this did happen, I don't know, if the trains were unavailable so everybody had to get taxis there, that's going to cause an absolute nightmare. So how would you plan that? If everybody got there 3 hours earlier, what would you do with the fan zone? Would you lock that down? That is a police kind of responsibility because we just can't physically control that. So in that instance, yes, it's your police commander. So every single major event at a venue will have a police commander allocated into the main operations centre. For the Rugby World Cup, we have a main operations centre. So in there, you've got physical security, you've got the Home Office, you've got the police, you've got cybersecurity, you've got venue kind of dedicated teams. Everybody's in there in one particular operations centre. So as soon as we I don't know, the venue team might call up we call it the mock. Or we got a problem because lots of people are showing up at the venue and we didn't anticipate this level of volume. That would then go straight to the police. The police would then go to the local police forces on the ground going, we've got a problem. We need to start cordoning off parts of the area because we could have a situation where there's overcrowding and potentially stampede things. And then that's for the police to coordinate. So we have to step back at that point. It's this is the police operation now. We have no say in that. We'll help coordinate that with physical assets on the ground. And then, my role from cyber is I'm just observing at this point. There's nothing I can do. The main thing really I can assist with is making sure the turnstiles aren't disrupted, the technology is up and running, there's no disruption to the systems that the police and physical security are using. How do you stop misinformation? That's much bigger than World Rugby. Misinformation is a big problem. It was a big problem during the Olympics, so we had a lot of athletes endorsing fake products. We had athletes saying crazy things and they didn't. It's a deep fake. And I think that's going to become more prevalent in the coming years, where you've got athletes going on to, you can post a video of an athlete endorsing something or saying some misinformation, which could have a massive disruption to the event. And that's where geopolitics come into it, because I don't know, what if somebody put a deep fake out there, got the FIFA World Cup in 2026, deep fake where Donald Trump goes onto something and says something crazy about one of the nations coming there. Could you imagine the kind of disruption that would cause? So it's like, we have to be really, really careful and have those legitimate sources and over communicate, going, only get your information from here.
Yes.
So I don't know how you control it. That's a bigger problem that I don't even have the answer to, but that's how we would control that misinformation. Go to legitimate sources, only listen to information there, coordinate with kind of assets on the ground, do your tabletops, plan for those eventualities. If it does happen, from my step back, let the professionals, the police have done this millions of times, they know what they do, and they have literally departments in the police on major sporting events. They have departments for this. So it's like, I'm not that skilled in that, I'm going to step back and I'm just going to support where I can. So that's the best way to do it when it comes to those kind of major kind of physical events at a venue.
Amazing. Ben, we've come to our time.
That was quick.
That was quick. That was quick. But I was really, really interested in that. So I'm sure that this will raise a lot of questions. So if anybody's got any questions for Ben regarding how cybersecurity affects physical events, look, he's very cleared up on it. So please feel free to drop Ben a line. I'll be sure to put his information down below. Once again, always a pleasure, Ben.
Thanks for having me, and glad to be on again, and I'm sure many more times in the future. Thank you again.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.